Okay, so I give the floor to Mr. Tim.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Who's wearing one of these today? They call them a wearable. Put your hand up if you're wearing one. Got one there, one there. Yes, very good. I won't ask the same question. I'm not wearing mine today. I wear mine when I'm exercising, but don't want it tracking me everywhere. I also feel that there's probably a few of those same people who have health insurance and are paying a lot of money in health insurance, and I know the medical facility here is actually very good in Malaysia. I suspect that there is a correlation between those people. Now, I was navigating my way through the Gartner archives in preparation for today, and in fact, we talk about how technology is changing our lives, how it's taking jobs, and how it's propelling us into this potentially unethical surrounds. But we probably also really want to talk about how technology is helping us and how it's being really positive in the way that what we wear and what we do and how we socialise. And it's all positive, but I found some interesting data about how technology is going to impact us, the consumer. And it was really fascinating. So those people who are in the zone of wearing wearables and who also do have health insurance, and this is probably targeted mostly to the US market, 40% of those people will in some way be able to reduce their health insurance as a result of wearing those wearables, as a result of Gartner's predictions. That was quite interesting. Let's also think about this little sticker that you have on the top of your windscreen. But before we do that, let's just have a look at the data and the data that we're collecting as a result of that. But I just want to move now to that little sticker that's in the top of your windscreen. And it says 15,000 kilometres is your next service. And at 14,200 kilometres, you're going, I'm going to go for a drive. Am I going to make it back by 15,000? What happens if I'm a couple of kilometres over? What's going to happen to my 15,000 kilometres? And we know we need to go and get this. We know we need to go and get this service. And we're now constrained by our lives surrounding this 15,000 kilometres. Well, thanks to the advent of IoT, Internet of Things, Gartner proposes or predicts that we will be benefiting as a result of the technology telling us when we're going to change our world. Not by just a pure number. The technology will now take us to a point where it can tell us when the technology needs the new oil. And that's a pretty significant number, 1 trillion. And so technology is here to help us, and technology is here to provide us with support and hopefully save us some money. And really, ladies and gentlemen, the international and the internet age is here, and you can call it what you like, but it basically is internet and IR 4.0, and it's a combination of big data, of robots, artificial intelligence, and of the connected world. And it's going to drastically affect everything we do. And we hope that it will also impact and benefit and potentially undo the wrongs of previous industrial revolutions. But what we really hope is that we, as a society, can utilise technology for the good, because 4.0, Industry 4.0 is here. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to come along to talk to you today. My name is Tim Bergmeier. I'm a director of a company called InPlace Software. We have offices around the world. We're focused on work-based learning, but we also have innovation labs that, and I suspect the reason why I've been invited today, which does expose us to a lot of new technology, and new technology that we both develop ourselves, but we're also scouring the world for new technology that we can then apply to our higher education clients as well as to our consultancy clients as well. So I do appreciate the opportunity to come along and talk today, and please do come and have a chat after the fact as well. Now, just wanted to talk a little bit about IR 4.0 and the expectations of time. And in my view, one of the best illustrations relating to 4.0 is this book, The Second Machine Age by Brynjolfsson and Andy McAfee. And it really does give a good understanding for us about these 4 industrial revolutions. That you'll see these diagrams used quite a lot as you will be going to new conferences. But what I really like is this particular video that gives us a great understanding of how technology is evolving, and some predictions that have been made by Andy McAfee. I'll just show you this video.
Stupid question. I think very few of us are really aware enough of the implications of Moore's Law. And I say that because I was not aware enough of them. There's a wonderful story that brings the point home. And it's a legend about the inventor of the game of chess, who takes his creation to the Emperor of India and shows the Emperor of India the game of chess. And the Emperor is so impressed by this beautiful game that he says, "You can name your own reward." And the inventor says, "Your Majesty, I'm a humble person. All I want is a pile of rice. And we're going to put 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard. We're going to double that. We're going to put 2 on the second square, double that, put 4 on the third square. Off we go, 64 squares, give me that pile of rice and I'll go home." And the Emperor says, "Wow, you really are a humble person. Make it so." Now, we kind of see what's coming, right? If we actually did that experiment, after 64 squares, there would literally be a pile of rice bigger than Mount Everest. It's more rice than has been produced in the history of the world. And in some parts of the story, when the Emperor realizes how he's been fooled, he has the inventor beheaded. Now, where that story gets really interesting, Ray Kurzweil made a really interesting point about that story. He said things only get crazy in the second half of the chessboard. So after 32 squares, you've got about 4 billion grains of rice. And that's a lot, but it's no more than you would get from harvesting 1 field. It's a number that we can kind of get our minds around. Nobody's going to get beheaded over that first half of the chessboard. It's only in the second half of the chessboard, when the numbers get crazy and we start talking about quadrillions of grains of rice, and our intuition, our human intuition, doesn't work anymore, doesn't keep up with that constant doubling going on. And the constant doubling is what's going on with Moore's Law. So Eric and I, my co-author, did a stupid calculation when we were writing the book. We said the US government started tracking this new thing called information technology in about 1958. So let's take that as the starting point, and let's take 18 months, a year and a half, as the doubling period for Moore's Law, and let's just see what happens with that. So we did that stupid calculation, and by that calculation, we, humanity, entered the second half of the chessboard with digital progress in about 2006. And for me, that really helps. I don't want to overemphasize that calculation, but for me, it really helps me to understand why we're seeing smartphones and driverless cars and automatic translation and powerful artificial intelligence and this amazing parade of technologies. They've really all appeared since then. I think of them as second half of the chessboard technologies. If you believe that story, there's one really clear implication. As we say in American English, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Don't you love the American rhetoric? We ain't seen nothing yet. Well, and he does have a point. So 2006 is when we started moving into that second half of the chessboard. So we're there, and we're there in it significantly, and we ain't seen nothing yet. So really is exciting, but it's also it gives us a good understanding of the power of exponential growth and Moore's Law. If you do know about it, Moore's Law is all about the power of exponential growth in technology. Now, I'm not going to explain Moore's Law today, but I'm going to give you just a bit of an explanation in real terms about how technology is changing and improving and how that we're utilising that. Now, Genome sequencing. Anyone know about genome sequencing? Anyone heard about that? Now, genome sequencing is an extraordinary, I guess, technology, and it's extraordinary in the research that it's been providing and executing over the last 20, 30 years. Genome sequencing is considered to be significant enough that it's the next as big as the internet, effectively. That's where it's considered to be a $3 trillion industry. Now, I'm not going to explain because there's a lot of more qualified people than me about genome sequencing, but basically it's dissecting your DNA and assembling it into a structure that allows you to be able to assess that and work out the anomalies. So what my job here is today is just talk about the technology, and as I say, there's a lot more people who are more qualified than I. President Clinton in 1990 announced a $3 billion project for 15 years, and that was to sequence the first genome. Now, whatever a genome is, that achievement was achieved in 2003, April, and that was when it was announced, and the first sequencing was achieved. So that took $3 billion to transform one genome. We now turn that into that's what genome does. It's basically comparing your good DNA with your bad DNA. But we compare that to where we're at today. So once you'd completed the first genome, it then took $100 million to complete a genome after that. And every genome, and I suspect there was probably only one or two done. And then as the technology evolved, and this is a great example of how science and hardware and technology combining, it then moved its way down. In fact, it exceeded Moore's law, but it moved to a point now where we're now at being able to complete that in 1 hour and within $1,000. And that's all in the sake of 15 years. That's extraordinary in my view, and what it can achieve now, and you can now send it off via your iPad, and you can get your results back with great accuracy. But the other good part about it is that if you speak to some people, or if you listen to some people, genome sequencing is only 1/10 or 1% of where it can actually take us, and hence the reason why there is so much interest in it. And the interest there did start to occur at about the 2008 mark when the industry started taking notice of it, and there's a lot of people who are spending a lot of money in this industry now. So beware of the 33rd square and above, and that's where Ray Kurzweil has, I guess, provided us with that insight. But really, let's have a think about the timelines of the revolutions. So the first revolution, just over 100 years or so. The second one was about 70, 60. The next one was about 30. And so where do you think we're at now? We're officially announced, 2016. Maybe this is going to be a 20-year revolution. 20 years. So what that means for us in the room is previous industrial revolutions were intergenerational. You learnt a skill, and that skill stayed with you, and it served you well for your whole career. You're now in a point where students are going to need to return back to study continually throughout their career. And we need to be preparing for that, and we need to be preparing our students for the fact that this is not the only time that they're going to be in the learning environment. And it's also been backed up by the World Economic Forum in 2016, January last year, which they said 50% of first year, the learnings from a first year will be lost in a 4-year course, technology course. So students need to be aware, and we need to be preparing them for the fact that they are absolutely going to come back. Now, I'll give you another example of IR 4.0. And this is relating to artificial intelligence, and this was a survey by Gartner, and the Gartner survey here just talks about 160 or so CIOs around the world and how prepared they are for artificial intelligence. And you can see here there's varying stages, but primarily most are in the early incubation stage or requirements gathering stage. A few are deploying and a few deploying next year. Now, what are they going to be using this for? And primarily for giving us ability to make us more efficient and the ability for us to, I guess, make decisions, which is what you were talking about, the graduate jobs earlier. Those graduate jobs are now being taken over by artificial intelligence. Data in, data out. There's no emotion, there's no human involvement. Now, the biggest challenge that was identified as a result of this survey was the skills gap. And the skills gap is a pretty significant 54% of things, of reasons for these companies not being able to progress further. And Gartner have also carried out a survey, or survey results and summaries, and you can see the recommendations here. Hire skilled students from your local universities, or carry out projects and internships, or carry out online learning, conference-based learning, in-person learning, retrain your existing staff. So this type of stuff is coming and is being recommended by industry leaders, and it's being recommended to industry leaders. So look a little bit more about Industry 4.0, and in January last year, the World Economic Forum basically announced 4.0 was here. And one of the interesting facets from my perspective was about the skills. And so we'll have a listen to Alan Marcus here about the skills that we can look forward to in Industry 4.0.
The way we learn, the way we play, and the way we socialize. What is certain is that the future workforce needs to align the skill set to keep pace. So 5 years from now, over 1/3 of the skills that are considered important in today's workforce will have changed. And during previous industrial revolutions, it often took decades to build new training systems and labor markets needed to develop the new skill sets on a large scale. But given the upcoming pace and scale of disruption brought on by the fourth industrial revolution, this is just not an option. So in order to meet the new talent skills and challenges brought about by expected business model disruptions, companies need to pursue a range of innovative workforce strategies, providing employees with wider exposure to roles across their firms, stepping up efforts to target female talent pools, and collaborating with the education sector more closely than in the past. These are some of the more popular measures we're seeing. Creativity will become one of the top 3 skills workers will need. With the avalanche of new products, new technologies, and new ways of working, workers are going to have to become more creative in order to benefit from these changes. And then, of course, there'll be competition between industries for this creative talent. Now, robots may help us get to where we want to be faster, but they still don't bring on the creativity and intuition that humans have, and so that becomes a critical skill set. Whereas negotiation and flexibility are high on the list today, they'll begin to drop from the top 10 as machines using masses of data begin to make some of those decisions for us. Now, another survey we did through one of our global agenda councils, this asked people about when they start to see artificial intelligent things start to take shape. They thought by 2026 they would expect to see one actually on the board of directors of a company. So that's the kind of change we might see.
Fascinating, right? Board of directors, a robot sitting there. Wonder what form that would take. So really, they recap those skills that were predicted at the World Economic Forum. So as you can see, the skills such as quality control, active listening, with the more manual skills, or the more manual of knowledge and skills. And then emotional intelligence, cognitive flexibility are coming into the fray. But also an interesting one there is creativity, and the ability for you to be able to convey that creativity onto machines that are then providing us with the data and providing us with the outcome of that data. So just an interesting insight, but maybe we have a look a little bit closer to home in Malaysia here. Michael Warren from KL Invest. I had a good catch up with him, and he has done a really good research on the skills gaps that we have here in Malaysia, and the skills and what we need to do to make sure that we can address those skills. So Michael did quite a lot of research on the impact of IR 4.0, and I think a lot of that actually made its way to the Prime Minister. But if you can see here, the one we're interested in, or the one I'm particularly interested in, is IoT and what we do if we don't have reform and what we end up if we do. Now, reform is in the shape of Industry 4.0 National Blueprint, which is due to be announced this year. And we've only got a couple of months left, but it was, when I was speaking to him, it was planned to be November, December. And so we can see, as a result of that industry blueprint, how we're protecting ourselves and how we're future-proofing ourselves as a result of the things we're going to be doing, and that's going to be doing a lot with the people in the room here today in preparing our students for Industry 4.0. Now, I also had the chance to meet with quite a lot of other industry leaders over the last 3 or 4 months, and I also just sent them out a little survey to ask some questions about their involvement and their exposure to higher education, what they feel needs to occur. And the general message there is that they want to strengthen communication and strengthen ties with higher education. But the other general message really is that they are adopting technology faster than higher education can teach it. And this was a common theme amongst all the feedback I was receiving, which means that they're saying, we want your students. We want your students not just 3 months before they graduate. We want your students year 1, year 2, year 3. We want to expose them to the opportunities and the technology that we're adopting in our factories, in our workplace, etc. And so they're very keen to see work-based learning be a key element in their business, because they see that as being able to future-proofs themselves as well. And I guess the key there is that it's not just the 6 months at the end. I was really interested to see that they want to see, even if it's only 2 weeks, every once a year, the couple of weeks, just to get that limited exposure, and then they're able to shape the student in their own way. Now, how can we do it? So we have students who are in the workplace who desperately require workplace skills. We have a combination of skills and desires, and we have industry who are wanting and would like to have all our students out in the workplace. So we need to combine the classroom with e-learning with work-based learning. Sounds easy, right? First of all, before we go into how we're going to achieve that, what I'd like to do is identify who we're competing with. Who are we competing with in the e-learning space? We're all going to live a long time. Hopefully some of us will live to 100. Maybe all of us will live to 100. But the other thing that's going to happen is that as we grow and as our students grow, they're going to yearn for more knowledge and we need to be able to make sure that we are providing that through an experience, an online learning experience. But our competitors are there, and they're very, very rare.
LinkedIn's social media network for professionals is about to get a little more, well, professional.
This is our largest acquisition to date, and incredibly important in terms of realizing our vision to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce.
LinkedIn announced Thursday it was purchasing online education company Lynda.com for a total of $1.5 billion, $780 million of which will be in cash, with the rest in company stock. LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner lauded Lynda.com as a, quote, best-in-class collection of high-quality premium content that is focused on professional skills, and that the two companies shared a similar mission. Linda Weinman, Lynda.com's co-founder, released her own statement, appropriately enough, on LinkedIn. There she wrote, "We are thrilled to be part of something bigger than ourselves and look forward to helping more people learn the skills that are needed in today's rapidly changing economic landscape." Lynda.com is a subscription-based service, so the purchase will bolster not only LinkedIn's revenue, but also its reach. In an interview last year with the Pacific Coast Business Times, Weinstein Company generates more than $100 million annually from 4 million subscribers in 150 countries. While LinkedIn already allows its users to share what skills they know, the professional network is hoping the acquisition will enable users to expand on those skills or add even more to their repertoire using the more than 2,900 courses on LinkedIn.
We're competing. 4 million subscribers, 150 countries. I'm sure one of those is Malaysia. So we're competing in that space. But what also happened then after that announcement, it got a little bit crazier again because Microsoft then went out and bought LinkedIn. So we now have the reach of Microsoft. We have the professional network on LinkedIn, and we have a significant amount of online learning available on lynda.com. We also have other collaborations that I know about, and the limited amount I know about must mean there's a lot more out there. So Genius, Peter Fisk, who used to be CEO of CIMB here, now works in the UK. He's got a collaboration with the world's largest search firm, the world's largest online educator and a large business school. The Thai government is just about ready to announce that they're putting out an online learning platform to all of their, basically to the whole of their population. Now they're the ones I know about in this region. And it's coming. So we need to compete. And we need to be able to compete. And I guess the question is, do you want to compete? Do you want to compete and make sure that we are the ones who are chosen to provide that online learning course rather than our competitors? Well, I believe that you have an extra opportunity and you're in the best position to be able to compete because you already know your customer. Your customer of 5 or 6 years down the line are the customers who are currently at your school or at your university right now. You've got a fabulous head start. The way that you are able to keep up with your students is through engagement. But engagement doesn't just mean sending an email out or a survey out 6 months before they're ready to graduate. Because by that stage, it's too late. You've lost them. They don't understand why you're suddenly sending this communication out saying, hey, we want to be friends. Engagement starts week 1. And the benefits cannot be ignored. Student retention, high uptake on 6-month post-graduation scores, which we know we're all measured on, league table rankings, etc. But the important one for this audience is the alumni. But the only way we can achieve that is through engagement, and that engagement needs to start from when the time they're under your care. And what we mean by that is that we want to be able to provide them with an experience that allows them to understand that you want to communicate and you want to make it simple for them. And the revenue for your alumni and the rewards for your alumni are fabulous. So first of all, you've got your revenue opportunities, future revenue opportunities. Now every university and every department is now tasked with being revenue positive. In fact, generating some type of revenue. Future mentors, you've probably all got mentor programs. Keeping in touch with them gives you those opportunities to have future mentorships. And obviously, if the student is performing well, they're going to move into managerial ranks, which then means you can then offer work-based learning experiences. So keeping in touch needs to occur, but it has to start from when they're under your care from the start. And that can be as simple as just a simple survey online, something they can relate to using their phones. Hey, how are you going? How are you feeling? How's it going? Small numbers of questions as well. So a campaign, we don't have the research yet on what the number of questions is, but we think it's no more than 5. And you're asking the same questions over and over again. You're asking the questions so that you can use that as comparative analysis. But the main thing we're doing here is asking these questions simply because we don't want them to be feeling that engagement is going to take them away from their Snapchat time. It's going to take them away from contacting their friends on Facebook. We want to be able to do that so that they feel that there's only a few minutes of their day going to be taken up with this engagement. So the outcome is that by the time they get to their post-6 months graduation scores, they realise that this is just another 2 minutes of their life. maybe 3 minutes of their life. It's very easy to do this. It's not going to be a big imposition. And so it's an education stage. Also, while they're under your care, you also have the ability to use, if you need to, the sledgehammer. And in this case, the sledgehammer can be making it mandatory before they complete next steps. Now, that could be something like offering an event, publishing the event, and then not allowing them to attend or at least submit to go to the event until they've completed the survey. Similar with work-based assignments. Now, you can do this with technology, and we've got some technology that does that. You can do this also manually. But the key is, while they're under your care, you've got the sledgehammer. 6 months after graduation, there's no sledgehammer remaining. Now, the big data rewards from when I mentioned earlier about having your same questions being asked over and over, the same questioning, gives you some big data rewards. And this is an example of we have. And you can see from moving from the left to the right, these are the 2012, 13, 14, 15, 14 2. So the objective here is to identify how the student's evolving while they're under your care. And you can see that there's a spasmodic approach there for the year one, which is probably what you'd expect. But as the years progress, the students are improving. And so you what we call a campaign, having the campaign with the same amount of questions gets you the outcome of being able to understand how the students are adopting and how they're responding to your approach. Now, this can be the classroom, or this can be online. And the good part about this is the ability for you to be able to execute this under both environments gives you some great chance for future clients and for future students, because you could use this data to sell your services. Look how our students have evolved under our care. So, e-learning and work-based learning. It was really interesting. We've got about 100 clients around the world, 100 universities or so. And our research with our clients who we know quite well, but also with research clients who we engaged with who are not our clients, but are people who we know in the industry, indicate that work-based learning combined with e-learning was either not worth them talking to me about, or is not mature enough to talk about, or has not progressed in technology-wise or even in process-wise. So around the world, e-learning and work-based learning is not very mature. And I think what I would like to do, and this was based on some conversations that we had internally but also externally, was what do we need to do to ensure this can occur? And first of all, do we ask, is there a need? And I'll probably ask the audience, do you think work-based learning and e-learning go together? Is there a need for them to occur together? Yeah, I think there is. There's a few nods. We believe there is. So what we're going to do is just explain to you what would need to happen for you to be able to combine work-based learning with e-learning. So first one is to be able to communicate with the student online. Now, obviously email is an obvious choice for that, but any way you can communicate with them with something they can relate to, app-like engagement tools are really good. Student self-sourcing. The idea there is that the student's going to be geographically located around the country or around the world, and you need to be able to capture where they're actually going. And that's very good for your own reason, for duplicates, but also because you want to engage with that employer, because you've got a duty of care to make sure that that student is safe, and you can manage your risk management with that. Online assessments are imperative, and as online logbooks, there's no way that a student's going to be able to get a signed signature of a logbook. So having an online logbook is really important. And student record system should always be your point of truth for your data, and we should be pulling data out of there and utilising and pushing back in there as well. I was meeting with Dr. Maslan, who's from a company called Favourite, who used to be a lecturer for many years and now has gone out into a startup world. He's on the advisory board of about 17 different universities in Malaysia. I was talking to him about our offerings and what we're able to understand as a result of the student experience and combining the academic result with the placement result. And he raised some really interesting points about how the biggest challenge, or a challenge that is spoken about in most of his advisory boards, and I've deliberately rubbed out plagiarism there because it's not plagiarism, it's really about paying for graduation and paying others to carry out tasks for you that you need to carry out to complete your graduation. And it's not so much plagiarism because they're building it from scratch. So they have access to the source code, so it's not plagiarism. It's just paying for graduation. And he was saying that there's a big enough challenge that it's spoken about that they're trying to find solutions for it. And what the problem is that usually when you start a new job, we have about a 12-month honeymoon period where we don't get asked too many questions and we just sit in a corner. After about 12 months, 2 years, we start getting found out a little bit more. By that stage, it's a little bit late. So what we wanted to do was to bring the data that we're already collecting with our academic data from the student record system with our placement data or our work-based learning data. And we're doing this already through this report. And this is from our analytics. And this here is, on the left-hand side, there's a spider web. And you can see what we've circled there is there's a blue line and a yellow line. The blue line represents the placement result. The yellow line represents the academic result. So you can see there's a gap, and these are competencies that relate to that particular course. So we delve into that particular competency that has the gap, and we can see on the right-hand side is the academic result, and these are learning objectives. And on the left-hand side is the placement result. And what we can see here is that we're assessing the student in the workplace against those same learning objectives as we're assessing in the curriculum. And so we can start identifying where there is some gaps in our curriculum. And we might be able to identify that we need to change our curriculum approach to those particular learning objectives, or we might identify that the supervisor is asking way too much of our students. At that point, all we're doing is providing you with the data. So I was showing this to Dr. Maslan, and he said, this is fabulous. He said, what about if we turn this around into being a student? And so we could identify academically how well the student's doing in the workplace and comparing that with how the student's performing in the academic side. So, fair enough. So we did. We turned it around and we took a student-centric approach rather than a course-centric approach. And here we have, on the left-hand side there is basically a bunch of students, and it's just identified by the student code. And above the top there, and it would be scrolled across because there would be more than 4 competencies, you would hope, in a curriculum. Each of those are competencies, and we can see that there's a legend down the bottom of green, which is 0 to 15% variance, orange 16 to 35% variance, and red being 36 and above % variance between the academic approach and the work-based approach. So in this particular student, we can see that there's quite a lot of variance, and this is a student that you obviously have a little bit of a look at. Now, good to see that most of these students are all greens and oranges, and we've only got one here, but let's just delve into the performance skills. And we can see here that this particular student, again, has a gap between how they've performed academically and how they've performed in the workplace. Now, you can go through each of those learning objectives and learning outcomes and identify whether there is any anomalies that you need to, and I'll call them anomalies, I like the word, because we're not accusing anything until we find some more. But this is your first layer of identification of whether there is some challenges with this particular student. And as I say, it's a big enough challenge that we're seeing it talked about in significant numbers in advisory boards. So that was just an interesting way to be able to identify, and I think e-learning in particular can benefit from this because you'll be capturing that data e-learning wise, but you also don't have as much contact with the student. So we start letting the data make decisions for us and let the data identify and interrogate what the outcome is. It was a bit deep. Maybe let's move on to a bit of fun stuff. Some of the technology that's being used around the world. We did a bit more research on this, and this was the fun research. Some technology that's being used in e-learning and work-based learning. So we did focus on the work-based learning element, and there is a lot of research that you can find for yourselves based on just the use of technology in higher education. But we focused on the work-based learning. In virtual reality, augmented reality, there's not a lot. VR, there is a lot. Mixed reality is generally everything's moving towards. Gamification was probably my favourite. I'll give you some examples of that. But VR as a start, so the hardware that's being utilised at the moment, there's HTC, there's Samsung Gear, Oculus, which is now owned by Facebook, Microsoft HoloLens, and there's a few others, Microsoft Daydream using your phones. Interesting to see that the gamers who are utilising this technology, this was a survey done at a conference in March this year. Most of it's being done in HTC, a fair bit of it in Oculus Rift as well. Not much in HoloLens, and probably the reason for that at the moment is it's about $3,000 US to buy a headset, where the other headsets are much more accessible. An example of using VR for work-based learning. There's a company in Australia called Lumina VR, or Luminal 360. They have just finished this week a project where they are using technology to train surveyors and to train builders. And they're training them how to use equipment like this, and I'm going to ask the audience if they know how to what this piece of equipment's called. Anyone know? Because this was new to me, so I just thought I'd ask. And I can't pronounce it. I think it's called theodolite. Anyway, there's just a bit of trivia for you. So theodolite, and basically what the objectives are is it's immersing students into building situations, and it allows them to see all different stages of the construction under the guise of a headset. It also really gives them the chance to put them into a very dangerous environment, an environment that they can't replicate at all within the real world, and it's really just exposing themselves to low probability but high consequence events. So that's now going to be used in January next year. Really exciting project because it's probably one of the most advanced. There's a lot of projects going on, but there's not a lot of video or outcomes based on the outcome yet because they're also immature. Probably wait another 12 months and we'll be having a lot more content. Now, mixed reality is really probably taking over AR, and so mixed reality is really the concept of using both realities, so using VR and AR in a combined way. And HoloLens, Microsoft HoloLens is probably doing the best of that at the moment, and I would suspect you're going to see a lot more Microsoft HoloLens. Probably one, because they're focusing a lot on the higher education market, and they're investing themselves as Microsoft would. But this is an example of what you can achieve in learning using HoloLens.
Best view of things.
Now, another area that's difficult for our students to fully grasp is the nervous system. HoloLens can make this much easier by improving our interactive learning beyond the single classroom. Professor Mark Griswold can teach us about the anatomy of the brain, even though he's in Cleveland. Let's show you how this works. Are you there, Mark?
I am. Hi, Pam. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our new classroom. This is our new system that allows me to teach and interact with you even though I'm not there at Build. I'll tell you, this feels really natural. The three of us can see each other as we're talking, which makes us feel connected. And even though you can only see my head and hands, you get a sense of my body language. This is really changing what it means to be in class.
Mark, let's show them the white matter tracks. These tracks act like superhighways, allowing messages to travel from one part of the brain to another. This example comes from an MRI scan of a real patient from the laboratory of Professor Cameron McIntyre at Case Western Reserve University.
It's critical that our students know how these structures relate to one another. I can tell you I've looked at data sets like this for over 10 years, and I never fully understood their 3D structure until I saw them in HoloLens. Let's say we have a patient with a brain tumor, which we're showing here with this red area. Hey Jeff and Henry, can you see how this tumor intersects the light blue tract, but not the green tract or the yellow one? This allows us to predict the impact of this tumor on the patient's symptoms and their outcomes after surgery.
This could impact the occipital lobe back here, which may harm the patient's vision.
It might also influence the parietal lobe here, which would affect their sense of touch.
The quicker our students learn facts like these, the more time they have to think with them. We are teaching them to think like a doctor. Thanks, Mark, for joining us today.
Bye, everybody.
Being untethered and able to walk around 3D holographic content gives our students a real advantage. Students have commented that a 15-minute session with HoloLens could have saved them dozens of hours in the cadaveric lab.
I showed that video because of the third party, the person who was actually not in the room, who was from Cleveland, joining them. Obviously, again, pertinent for the audience today. But that's really cool. I know that spent a lot of time on that, and that would have been propped up a fair bit financially by Microsoft, I suspect. So we're still waiting for that to make its way to the general higher education, but that's where it's coming. Well, that's where it's going, and that's coming towards us at rapid pace. So gamification is the other one that I really enjoy, and I think it's the good part about gamification is that it's accessible, and it's accessible because you don't need a headset, you don't need to pay anything, and it's quite immersive. Here's an example of a gamification for e-learning that was utilised, shown to me last week when I was in Singapore with Anne Ranyu.
PLI presents the newest addition to its portfolio of innovative learning by doing programs, the Financial Statements Game. Step into the shoes of an associate at a fictional law firm.
Hi, please come in. I'm so glad you're here.
Analyze 3 companies' financials in order to make an acquisition recommendation to an important client. Flag the risks you identify in the financial statements. Gauge what the CFOs have to say.
The lawyer from Smith, Davis & Barnes, Harvey Chambers, WX Enterprises.
And look for more risk indicators in emails, articles, and voicemails.
I heard that my financial statements contain some errors.
An in-game mentor provides guidance and feedback. Join us to learn how to dissect financial statements and unpack the stories each one has to tell.
Okay, back to work. Go to your office and go get it.
That was really fun. The day I spent with Anne Ranyu was really fun, and we didn't play that particular one, but we got involved in some immersive role play, and I mean that last one is talking about financial statements, but actually makes us all want to be accountants. And the immersive role play there in the narrative games, it just puts us into this situational awareness. This one here is where you're dropped into a fictional location called Zobia, and you need to go and build a courthouse, and you have to meet with the local tribesmen and eldersmen, and they ask you questions and you ask them questions back, and you get the right or the wrong answer that helps you get to the next stage. This one here is allowing you to assess whether you are fit to be an actuary or an accountant. This was PwC in Australia, and it puts you into a situation. You then need to go and interview the various people. In this case, you're going and making an acquisition for a mine in Australia, and you go and interview each of these people. Well, what was really interesting was that there was a time. There was a number of questions you had to get through, but you had to get through them in a space of a minute, and it got a bit hair-raising there because you were in the last 10 seconds and you hadn't asked all your questions. It was really good fun. So gamification is one of my personal favourite, just because of the accessibility. But in terms of the pros and cons of using any or all of these, so student outcomes and performance tracking is automated. So you're getting the outcomes of how the students, because they're interacting real time. Because it's a safe environment, you're going to be exposed to many more catastrophic events. Now, there's a piece of work that was done by Daydream and by Google, and they compared learning how to build it, how to make an espresso using YouTube versus using VR. And so they identified that using VR, there was less time taken and there was less mistakes. So the cons were interesting and quite amusing in the sense that if you trained someone in VR and they carried out a particular task, in this case it was to not to touch the steam nozzle. It didn't matter what they put out there in terms of warnings. If they touched the steam nozzle when they were using VR, inevitably they went in the real world and touched the steam nozzle. Kind of that meant that Google's approach was that it's still VR is still a little bit further away than what we maybe think. There's a cost of hardware and time to deliver content. So those gamification games, they take about 6 months from first day to completion. And I presume this is not necessarily a con, but I assume that it has made people sick and it has scared people in the corporate world before, which would indicate we don't want to do that. So future announcements, there is a lot coming. Interesting, if you know about IBM Watson and the medical school at NTU. So the first thing about NTU Medical School is they've digitized all their content. And so they're now reaping the benefits of that. And they've, you mentioned earlier that there's a Claire Watson, I think, was mentioned in Texas. Well, I think this is one of the first projects I know about in higher education relating to using the IBM Watson knowledge. And it's artificial intelligence using natural language and machine learning. Basically, now they've digitized all that content. They're going to be observing the next 2 years worth of lectures face-to-face and taking all of that in so that they can then provide an immersive online experience or a digital experience for future students. So that's really exciting. Pearson seem to be very active in this space, so keep your eye on them. If you do get approached to do a trial project, then snap it up because they're doing a lot of good stuff. We also have some VR and some interesting things going on with a major Hollywood content producer and also a global hardware provider. So everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. We're not excluded from that. Now, really, just in summary of work-based learning and e-learning, it can be done. You don't need technology to do it, but what you do need is a lot of manpower. And I guess what we're in the business of is telling you not to use manpower, but I'm not in the business of saying it can't be achieved. You can achieve the same outcomes using lots of manual process as you can in the technology space. That's the case everywhere. Combining e-learning outcomes with work-based learning gives you some extraordinary capability in being able to analyse the data and analyse the outcomes and get you to a great student result. And the student results can be greatly improved as a result, and the QS ratings on our clients who are doing this right now are increasing by 10, 20, 30, 40%, and that's over the last 4 or 5 years. And digitising your content, and you'll probably talk about this a lot throughout this, digitising your content is imperative if you want to start taking advantage of the technology that's available. So it's coming. Resistance is futile. Accept it, consume it, and enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tim Bergmeier. So let's equip ourselves with technological knowledge, skill, and advancement to make us ourselves more relevant to the Industrial Revolution 4.0, right? So now I would like to call upon Prof. Dr. Adnor Azia to give our token of appreciation to our speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now adjourn for lunch. So we will be back here at 2 p.m. for our third keynote speaker. Thank you.